Hey! Woo! So many excited people in the chat, and with good reason, because today we have launched a new Kevin Powell course. Yay! Woo! Very excited for this. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm really excited for the course. So,
yeah, it hasn't been that long in the making, actually. Some courses seem to take ages, but this one kind of was talked about, and now it's here. So it's all very exciting. How was your experience of building this course?
I had a lot of fun building it. It was a nice. It's always nice having such a cool design to be working on. So, yeah, it sort of gets you motivated to get through it. And like you said, the whole thing came together really fast on everybody's side. So, pretty cool on that.
Yeah, super cool. And we will be looking at the course shortly. I'm sorry, my neighbour has decided that 5 o'clock on a Wednesday is the perfect time to fire up the leaf blower, but hopefully he stops it. Yeah, this has happened before, actually. I should probably have a word with him. Anyway, who is here in the chat? Many people saying hello from all over the world. Let us know, as Mohammed says, where are you guys from? And we do a thing here, if I can find it. If you are new, please put a rabbit in the chat. And if you've been before, hit me with that tiger. We don't do anything with this information. It's just for fun and something of a tradition and interesting to see. Whether you've been before. Hola, Delfina from Argentina. Yes, so Kevin, I have prepared a few questions for you about this new course so we can show people what it's all about. But I would also like to invite questions from the chat. So if you would like to ask Kevin a question, just drop it in the chat. But for now, let's have a look at the course. So here it is, 6+ hours long, which is amazing. And we've split it into these sections here. Partly to make it more approachable, but also because we realized that it kind of naturally split quite well into those sections. Would you like to tell us a little bit about these sections, Kevin?
Yeah, so when putting together the course, and one of the first things for me on it was creating that design system. And it worked out really well just with the Frontend Mentor, with the design that they provided. They did provide us with an actual design system to go with it. So I saw it as a really nice opportunity to sort of focus on that on a CSS design system as well, which is something that I think doesn't get a lot, you don't hear about too much until you hit the real world, and then all of a sudden you might be thrown into using one. And so as you can see, it's actually the longest part of the course and the longest section of the course, just because we do a lot of upfront work to later on sort of dive in and build out the other sections quite a lot faster. And then once the design system's done, then we can sort of get into a few of the other things, building out the layout for the homepage, and that layout sort of gets reused also throughout the other pages. The navigation itself, just because navigations, like usual, are one of those small components that take quite a bit of time sometimes to put together, because you have the responsiveness that comes into it, and so that it's like two different layouts almost that you're building. And then sort of the destination page and then the tabs are just about sort of completing the rest of the site. So the destination page is, again, taking sort of the layout that we did with the home page, but making it work there and dive deeper a little bit, because it's a more complex layout. So we dive deeper into grid specifically in that one and getting things where we want them to be. And the tabs lessons, we finally get into some JavaScript and start making things come to life a little bit.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm super excited about this, especially because the design system, as you say, is something which people often come across for the first time in their job, not in any kind of tutorial. So it's really exciting to see that in here. Very interested to take the course myself, actually. Yeah. What skills are people going to take away from doing this course?
So yeah, we cover a lot in the course, I think. So it is one of the reasons why I put it as an intermediate level, or, when we talked about it, I think it sort of fits more in there because it's not about learning specific property value pairs or just learning like the basics of HTML and CSS. It's sort of leveling up from there. So, it does cover a lot of topics. We're doing Flexbox and Grid. I sort of talk about why I'm using one over the other in the different situations. There's the whole building of the design system. With the design system, there's dive into custom properties and utility classes, and say, like, I know sometimes people are like, if we have custom properties, do we need utility classes, and vice versa? So I sort of look at why it is useful to have both along the way. We go into modern CSS and looking at things like clamp, what else? At supports, logical properties, and a lot of the newer things there. And I also tried to get into accessibility as well, because I think it's something that I'm working really hard on improving on my own end, and think it's a really important thing for students and people that are learning to have as a base before they even get further in. So yeah, I took a nice dive into looking at accessibility, and that it doesn't have to be too complicated.
Yeah, really looking forward to hearing a bit more about that a bit later. One question from Sile, maybe Sile. Is this course going to be added to the front-end career path? No plans at the moment to do that. It's currently a standalone course, but it's completely free. So I suppose I should give you the link. Here it is, scrimba.com/learn/space travel. So yeah, check it out and enroll. Already, unbelievably, there are 607 students enrolled, and it's been live for about 2 hours. So you're in good company. Yeah, amazing stuff. So you mentioned accessibility there, Kevin. Can you give us a little sneak preview of what features you've added to this site?
Yeah. So from early on, I actually sort of approached it when we got into the layout of doing it in a bit of a standard way that you see people do with divs in a few spots that maybe shouldn't be, just so I could address it later on and say, if we just change a few tags here, we're making a more, using our semantic HTML, that we're already improving the accessibility there because it creates landmarks within the site for assistive technologies. I look at things like screen reader only, like creating a class that lets us have content on the page that can give a screen reader context, where visually we don't need that context. So one of the examples is like on a menu button, the hamburger button. We have text in there that actually says menu, because if screen reader gets to that button, they can't see the icon. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's just an empty button, effectively. So by putting content in there that tells them it's the menu, then they know what that is, but we're visually hiding it from users. And we also looked at the area hidden attribute, which is the opposite, where we're hiding content from screen readers, but sighted users can still see that content because it's more decorative. And I've used this before with, say, sometimes you want a cool effect where you need the same text 2 times, and it's like overlapping, so you can do something fun with that. If a screen reader got to that, it would read the text 2 times, and you don't want that to happen because it just kills the flow. Or in this case, we have like some numbers and stuff like that visually look really cool, but for a screen reader, it would just be weird to actually read them out. So looking at that. So yeah, at the beginning, a lot of the things are these smaller, really easy to implement things. And then later in, when we do get to the tabs as well, I sort of dove a lot deeper in there, looking more at area and looking at roles, and just making sure that that's well set up for assistive technologies to understand what's actually happening there. But again, to me, the JavaScript and even setting up the HTML, getting the CSS, and doing the JavaScript for it was a lot more work than it was just to add a few roles and area attributes here and there. So just to sort of look at how we can, with a little bit of extra effort, we can make something a lot more accessible.
That is really cool. And here is a look at the design that the course works on. So this is the mobile screen size, and here's the hamburger icon you mentioned just now. So yeah, this has an ARIA label, was it? That basically says menu, so that people with a screen reader can see what it does. So, wow, amazing. Let's take a sort of closer look at the design, I suppose. So here is the desktop design. I really like this. I think it looks super cool. This is our homepage. What do you think when you first saw the design, Kevin, because I was really impressed. I thought it looked awesome.
Yeah, I really liked it, and I think that there's nothing. It's very simple in one sense. We're not doing this long page that keeps on scrolling with tons of stuff on it, but it's just really elegant, nice white space on there. It just looks really good. I thought that Matt and the team they have over there did a really good job with it.
Yeah, and I should mention that this is a design from Frontend Mentor. So this is a collab between Scrimba, Kevin, and Frontend Mentor. Frontend Mentor very nicely created this design for us. Was there anything you found intimidating about this design? Because I honestly don't know if I'd know where to start with this. But you have much more experience than me, so maybe you thought it looked fairly simple. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I ended up. I mean, one thing that was really nice with it is if you look from one page to the next, there's a lot of the elements that are changing on the pages are different, but we're sort of getting this 2-column thing. So we have the space and then the explore button. Then we have the picture of the moon with the text and all that content for the moon. And then we sort of get like the pattern of the layout repeats itself a little bit. So it's just about finding, okay, if I can get the layout to work here, I should be able to get it to work across all the pages, maybe with a few tweaks here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see how that would carry across the different pages. Myzam asks, do we learn Figma in this course? Well, Frontend Mentor have provided a Figma file, basically, which is what I'm looking at now. How have you kind of used that in the course, Kevin?
We didn't dive too much into Figma. I'm showing the design files that they've provided us, and I encourage people to go into them. So I'm not diving into actually how to use Figma, just because it's very easy to just get the font. I mean, especially with the design system they provided, it's very easy to get most of the information. And for me, I did a lot of it by eye when it came to spacing, even though I do talk, like it's easy. You can go in the Figma file and you can use Figma for free. So you don't need, you just sign up for an account and you can use these files. And if you can just do an inspect on the different files and get the font sizes that are being used, you can see the spacing between elements and things like that. So I didn't dive specifically into how to use Figma. I was just referencing it throughout to make sure that my design was actually matching what we were trying to create.
Yeah, which basically is what you'd be doing in a front-end role. So excellent practice there. Yeah. Marika asks, did Scrimba have a say when they came up with the topic and the design? Yes to both. The topic, we kind of brainstormed a few ideas, I think all of us together with Kevin in a meeting. And then we had 3 kind of favorites. And I think we did a poll on Twitter, and Space Travel won by quite a large margin. So we went with that. And then with the design, Frontend Mentor made it and then showed it to us all, and we all kind of gave feedback, and then they tweaked it from there. So pretty much we had a say in all stages, which was really nice. Yeah.
It was cool seeing the process too that they went through, just because at the beginning we just saw the wireframes, and then we saw sort of as the design was worked on a little bit, and then the fonts were changing and stuff like that. So I've designed stuff myself, but it's nice seeing sort of the process from the other side, and from that initial wireframe to seeing this, and obviously it looks fantastic. So
yeah, that's super exciting. Nazir has a question. Will this be contained layout for large screens, or will it be scaled to fit 100 VW? Which kind of ties into a question I had about what was your approach to responsiveness with this?
Yeah, so like I've talked about a lot, for me, responsiveness is always mobile first. But in this case, because we did have the design system in place, so at the very beginning, starting there, we sort of had a lot of things that we needed we sort of just would make putting together most of the site really easy, other than actually making the layout. So it's mobile first in the sense that most of the styling's done there, and then we sort of adapt as the screens get larger, with one exception, which is the navigation, where I did split that up into, we actually have a few different media queries there with a min width, a min and max width, and then a max width as well. And the max width I don't use very often, but navigation for me is one of the places where I often do. So it's sort of more of a, large, you're looking at it the opposite way, where I'm just trying to isolate some styles to be mobile only, just because there's so much different with the navigation between the different screen sizes, where all of the other elements, the layout shifts around a little bit. But other than that, you're laying sort of, when you do your mobile layout version of it, you're laying everything in place, and then you can just sort of shift things around, play with your font sizes a little bit as the design gets bigger.
Yeah, very exciting there. I think this course is quite unique in that you were, in a way, the first user of this design from Frontend Mentor. So you kind of had to approach it in a similar way to what students are going to do when they take the course. So what was your experience of coding that up, and which parts, if any, were the trickiest?
Yeah, so I mean, it was really fun just getting a fresh design that I could do that I didn't actually design myself. So that was great. And I've done some Frontend Mentor challenges before, but being the first one, it's kind of exciting to know that, like, I get to see what I can do without input from other people. So I had a lot of fun with it. What parts were the trickiest? I ran into the same mistake I think a lot of people do, where they overcomplicate things. So when I said I sort of saw this similar grid everywhere, the initial grid I set up for the layout itself, I overcomplicated, and it was kind of messy. And then as I was trying to get it to adapt to the other pages, I was running into problems. And then I'm just like, you know what? I pretty much just scrapped what I had and started it again, but really, really simple, and it worked really well. And the hardest part, maybe could you zoom in a bit on the navigation, just so people can see it a bit better?
Yep.
Because the hardest part was that line between the logo and the rest of the navigation.
But this
Yeah, it's.
All right.
I must have tried like 6 different approaches to get that to work, and again, it looks like such a simple little element, but everything I would try, there'd be something wrong with it. It would like shift the wrong way, or it would shrink too much, or it would be. I was going crazy with it, and. Maybe I actually in the course said, if somebody has another solution for it, please share it with me, because I think in the end I came to I think it works super well. I'm super happy with it. But it just took a lot of different attempts to find the solution that I did in the end. And I think it's the first time I've ever done something the way I did it there, because I ended up using a pseudo element, which I was expecting to use. But I did it in a way that I've never done before. So it was kind of interesting. And in the end, it ended up being a really simple solution, and it works really well. But yeah, I definitely asked and would love if people get to that and they find a way that works really well to share it with me, because I feel like I made either a silly mistake when I was working on it with my other attempts or something, because I struggled way more than you'd think for adding a line into the design. And again, that if I just needed it like this, it would be fine. But it's to have it responsive and to work as the screen's getting smaller and all of that presented the biggest issue for me.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that something which looks simple like this can end up taking the amount of time that the rest of the site takes. I can definitely imagine that. So I'm excited to get to this part of the course and find out how you did it. Speaking of which, if you've just joined us, here's the link to the course, so you too can find out how Kevin added this line. It's not as easy as it looks, that's for sure. Oh, Brent. I saw that line too and cried a bit inside thinking on how to do it. Yeah, totally. Amazing. So, as you mentioned previously, quite a big chunk of the course is dedicated to learning how to make a design system. Lots of people probably don't know what one of those actually is. So can you tell us a bit about that and the benefits of basically using it?
Yeah, so a design system is something where it's something that we put in place, a CSS file. Actually, the easiest way to think about it, maybe because most people have used or at least heard of Bootstrap or Tailwind, where you just have like this existing CSS file that you can just come in and start using. And in there, they have font sizes set up, they have margins set up, they have all these classes that are pre-existing. And so it's that type of idea where we're coming in and creating our own system like that, where we have all the fonts, all the everything that we need to put in place, the colors and all of those things are existing, they're there to start using. So then when we start working on the actual site, that we don't have to start going, like we're not working page to page and we're not focusing, okay, what's on this page? Okay, or this section even. You see that a lot where people do section by section, where there's so many repeated things throughout the design, from the fonts being used, the font sizes, the colors and all of that. So it's creating something that we can easily use and plug and play all of these different classes. So we're not writing tons and tons of CSS and we end up with a much smaller file in the end. through using one of them. And again, a lot of what I did with that design system was initially setting up custom properties and then using those custom properties through a whole bunch of utility classes that I put into place.
Yeah, so it's a way basically of making your CSS work as efficiently as possible for you and writing less CSS, which a lot of people, I'm sure, will appreciate.
And I mean, one of the biggest benefits is, well, there's this big initial time commitment that you have to put into it. And sometimes you feel like, man, I'm spending all this time working on something that's not even, like, I'm not making a page come to life right now. I'm just spending all this time writing a bunch of classes. But the real benefit comes after, when you actually start making those pages and all of that is there. And then it just goes so much faster to actually put all of those things together. And I think it's something we see in the course where we spend all that upfront time and then the next page goes pretty fast, though we have to work on the layout a bit. But then everything we do after that, like, it just sort of flies by because we can just apply the classes that we already have. Sometimes you realize you might have made a mistake. You have to tweak something in your design system just so it works everywhere you need it to. But things can come together just so quickly after that, and it makes the project a lot more scalable. So a lot of, with this case, we only have 4 pages, but let's say the team, you're working at this as a company and they come back 3 months later and they have to add 4 more pages to it. You're not creating a whole bunch of CSS to try and get those 4 pages to come to life. You use existing stuff that's in your design system to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose with maintenance further down the line as well, if they suddenly decide they want purple to be their font color or whatever, it's very easy to change it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, making changes and anything like that, it becomes a lot easier.
Perfect. Jeff says, I'm late to the party. Is there a new Scrimba course from KP? There is indeed. It went live just a couple of hours ago. Here we are, and I believe, if I refresh, oh look, 776 students now. Oh, wow, that's really taking off, pun intended. That is cool, says Olivier. Simple line can make a headache. Oh, it sure can. Yeah. Well, excited to see how Kevin has solved that one. So I'm not sure if this is related directly to the design system, but I know that you have included quite a few CSS resets in the course, which are often overlooked, I think. Can you tell us a bit about how you decided what to reset and why it's important?
Yeah, so CSS resets sort of, sometimes it's just people don't even think about it and then you run into some issues down the road, or you just get into the habit of always using the same one all the time. So I purposely wrote the reset out as one of the lessons in the course just so we could actually focus on why we're changing these things, because I think if ever you are using a reset, it's a good idea to know why you're using the reset. And there's lots out there. There's normalize and sanitize that are very, they're linked projects. They're just, sanitize has a bit more opinionated CSS in it. There's the full-on like CSS reset by Eric Meyer that was just like sort of the nuclear blast. Let's start from zero. And they're important because CSS as a language, it's not like other languages where they can make breaking changes to it. Everything just needs to keep building on what was happening from the very beginning. And website, the concerns they had when they first started were very different to what we have now. And they never imagined a web that would become what it is now. And like the most common thing you'll ever see people add every single time to their CSS files, probably changing the box sizing to border box. And it would be great if that could be the default. But if ever the browsers said, you know what, let's make that the new default, it would break probably literally tens of millions of websites. Like the layouts would just fall apart if browsers change the default there. So it's just these things that we sort of have to live with based on the history of CSS and implement to be able to overcome some, or it's to make our life easier really. And it doesn't take a lot of time. The one that I ended up putting in was a modified version of CSS Reset by Andy Bell, which sort of is, he calls it his modern CSS reset. And it's just to, it's a fairly basic one. We don't change too much, but we just sort of helps us set the stage to make sure that going forward things are in place and we won't run into any surprises. Yeah,
awesome. So check out the course and find out about the modern way to reset your CSS. Michael asks, whoa, is Kevin basically selling us on Tailwind?
No. I do think that if you, with things like Tailwind and Bootstrap, that the reason people like them is because you can just go in and start working so quickly. And that's why building out your own design system also enables you to do that, just with that upfront investment of actually building it yourself. The nice thing with building your own is you're building something that's for your site, that's going to work for you. And as cool as things like Tailwind, and Tailwind's a bit different from Bootstrap because Tailwind is so utility based, or utility class based, but with those other ones, they sort of have to make something that could work for any project in any situation. Especially Bootstrap, where there's a lot more, they sort of have a bit more going on with it, but they sort of have to cover, they're very generic. Whereas when you build your own design system, you're building something that's for your project. I didn't want to go, we could have made a much more robust and deeper one than we did here, but I really wanted to focus on one that would suit our needs for what we were building here. And I sort of talk about that a bit as we go through it. And it is, I think, a lot, like we have the whole Tailwind movement of just utility classes. And there's the other end of the spectrum is BEM, which is a sort of a CSS naming convention that was extremely popular, and it still is, I think, the number one way that a lot of companies are still working. And you hear more and more about finding this middle ground, and it seems to be like, whenever you have two extremes, usually somewhere in the middle is the best idea. And so I do think utility classes are super useful, just not for everything. And so I do go into that in the course too, of let's create the ones we're going to need, but sometimes having component classes is a good thing too, and actually makes it easier to maintain your site rather than more difficult or longer.
That makes total sense, because people talk a lot about websites looking bootstrappy, which obviously is not what you want, but you also want some of the convenience that Bootstrap and Tailwind provide. So like you say, it's basically making your own custom Tailwind, if you want to think of it like that, Michael. The Michael Wind. Maybe not. Bob says, my problem is I'll spend a ton of time building a design system or super reusable React components and then only use them 1 to 2 times, which poses an interesting question, I suppose, of how do you know when you're spending too much time on a design system, and how can you find the middle ground there? Because I can imagine myself really going all out, as Bob says, and then not actually using it.
And even one of the things I think that I did hear that worked out really well actually was when I styled, because we had the tab system that we created. So there's tabs, then there's these dots that are, instead of tabs, it's like the little dot circles underneath. So each one, you can pull them up, we can see them better, and then there's a third page that has big numbers instead. And so I didn't worry about the functionality of how that was going to work. I only worried about styling it up and making sure that we had those in our design system so we could use them. Cool. Then when I did the JavaScript to make it functional, it turned out that you could use the exact same JavaScript on all of them and make it work. So it was, I didn't make this component and then have to make it functional and do everything all together, and then have to do a new one, and then have to do a new one. By sort of separating the CSS from the JavaScript there, they look very visually different from one another across all 3 pages, but functionally they're exactly the same thing. So that was one thing I think that helps speed things up or makes things a bit more reusable on that side of things. And I also think that it does become it does help us when we have something like when you have the design system from the designer, which we had in this case, because you sort of have an idea of the different things that are going to be coming up and are going to be repeated throughout the design. So there's that too. Definitely helps.
Amazing. Marika just realized that Kevin is wearing a CSS t-shirt. Really cool. Yeah.
This is actually from the state of CSS, which is an annual survey they do on people's knowledge and use of CSS. And I got it last year, but I think the survey is still open now. I know it has been open for a little while, but at stateofcss.com, the more people that answer, the better. You might already know the state of JS as well. So they run the annual surveys for both of those. And right now the state of CSS is open. So it always helps us out to get, I think it's a really cool initiative because it gives us a bigger picture of what's being used, where things are trending and all of that.
Very interesting. I'll go and do this after the stream. And Nazir says, border box, the only positive thing that happened in the web development due to IE. Denny asks an interesting question. Hi, Kevin. Are you using CSS Clamp for this project? I found out about it from one of your videos and use it all over for responsiveness now.
I am for a few things. I look at Clamp as well as Min and Max, which are similar, but Clamp will set like a minimum, a maximum, and something in the middle so they can actually grow. So I use it for a couple of the fonts for Clamp. I find Clamp for responsive text is really nice. And then for padding and for margins and things like that, depending on the situation, either min or max can actually be really useful for different types of things. So I sort of explore the three of them together. Or at different points, I should say, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hey Kevin, says Androka 007. Oh. Would you ever build up a design system with Tailwind as a skeleton and do specific elements yourself? So would it work with a project like this if you had loads of similar components? Interesting.
I haven't tried doing that. It's definitely something you could do. And I know within Tailwind, you can sort of, you can make your own stuff to add into the project as well. I do know when it comes to design systems like this, like if ever you're using something like a preprocessor like Sass or Less or Stylus, which I know there's a lot of that functionality is coming to CSS now, but there's a few things that you can do in there that could actually make it so you could set up like one file. Again, it would take a little bit of setup to get into it and to create it, but you could have one master file almost that's setting all your tokens up basically. So you could go in and like, okay, in this file, I'm going to change my colors it's almost like a JSON file. It'll look a little bit different, but very similar to like a JSON file. Or I've even seen systems that will take a JSON file and turn it into CSS. So you'd have your JSON file with all your colors and you just replace them there. You replace your font sizes, you replace a few other things, and then you just get all of your classes based on that. And that's sort of more how I would work if I was going in here. I wanted to keep it to vanilla HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and let people, if they are working on other things, take those extra steps and push things a little more, just to sort of make it as accessible, let as many people as possible follow along and be a bit technology agnostic in a way. But if I were working on a bigger project or something personal to me, that's more how I would go about it.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting approach. Wow, using a JSON file. Yeah. So I'm sure many people will be wondering, how much JS is actually involved in this course? And how much JS would you need to know to do it successfully, do you think?
So I did make it, I tried to make it so if you're not comfortable with JS, you could do almost the entire thing. The easiest part of JavaScript is when we make the navigation at small screens, just so we can make it open and close. And I think even if you're really new to JavaScript, you could follow along on that part of it without any issues, because it's pretty simple how that works. And even I mention it during the course, and when we get to these different pages, that if somebody is in their journey where they're not comfortable with JavaScript yet, it's cool because you could take this design and make the rest of it work without anything. Because instead of making those components that are going between, like they're the different crew members, you could make that happen where you just have an individual page, and instead of buttons at the bottom, those could be links, and it just switches page to page to page. So if you're really early in the journey and you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the JavaScript, but you still want to take it on, you could 100% do it and make a really cool looking site. And then for me, and of course, I also mentioned that if you're further along and maybe you're learning React or Vue or Svelte or something like that, and you want to incorporate what you're learning there, you could also do that and push things a lot further than what I do. They do provide a data.json file for the entire project. So you could make this like a single page app too if you wanted to, with everything's in place to make that happen. And I did that sort of middle ground, again, more tech agnostic with just vanilla JavaScript. So we do get into the tab system there. For me, I don't think it's too complex. But if you're brand new to JavaScript, maybe there'd probably be a few things that could catch you off guard with the challenges, especially that I give in there, because there's little gotchas, but it's the only thing we really do is make the navigation that can open and close, and then we make that tab system. And again, it's one tab system that works across all the pages. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's these dot indicators here, these numbers, and then is the nav also the same function, or is that slightly different?
No, in the nav I actually built it so it's each individual page, yeah. But that is something, again, if you made it as like a single page app, that's something that, using React or Vue or something, you could definitely do that and make it into something like that.
But probably
those tabs, yes, exactly. Those ones, it's using the same JavaScript through the other tabs. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm sure people will be really excited for that. Kevin has introduced the next question I wanted to ask, which is to do with how you use Flexbox and Grid in this course. Did you use subgrid for this project, Kevin?
I might be being asked because I'm running a subgrid awareness month this week on my YouTube channel,
Yeah.
just to try and raise awareness. But I didn't. My initial thought actually was that there was a problem I sort of ran into with the layout, with the way the image and the nav and stuff are set up because of the tab system. And I mentioned it during the course that, but even subgrid wouldn't have saved me with the problem I ran into.
Oh, nice.
But no, we're not using subgrid. And I think for a layout like this, it wouldn't really have a big benefit compared to other things that we're looking at. But yeah, but
How did you,
oh, sorry.
yeah. So you've used Flexbox and Grid, I think, in this course. My tendency is to use Flexbox for everything because I don't really understand Grid, to be honest. How have you decided where to use these two technologies?
Yeah, so my first instinct for a long time also was to use Flexbox, and then save Grid for like, okay, there's clearly a grid structure here with, you know, might be the way certain things are set up, and or you hear like the 2D layouts and you go, okay, yeah, I can clearly see how this could be a grid.
Yeah.
And I've sort of switched that around lately where I'm now defaulting to using Grid and then going to Flexbox if Grid can't do what I need it to. And I'm doing that because Grid gives you a little bit more firm control on what's happening. And so in this case, Grid, even though, and this is where it's a 2-column layout, you could easily do a 2-column layout with Flexbox, but I actually use Grid to complete it. And I sort of mentioned why as we go through it, because it's just that rigidity of Grid where the parent sort of has the control and the children just pop into the cells that you've created. It makes it a lot easier to have the consistency page to page. And then on the crew page, I actually ran into an issue with the images, the size of the images because of that. But the way we set things up, it's really easy to adapt that grid and make it a little bit different for an individual page without having to really do a lot of work. And we can sort of solve that problem that pops up along the way. So I ended up using Grid, and I sort of, at one point, we actually compare why I use Grid over Flexbox for that and just compare the differences. Either one would work, but I thought it was a nice opportunity to look at why sort of Grid can function better in a situation like that. For all, the tabs are with Flex, those dots next to each other are all with Flex. Smaller things that just need to live in like a certain space, Flex, it works. You know, you do a display Flex, you have columns, and then you can just keep on going. So, you know, it works so well for that, where Grid does require that a little bit more initial setup to actually get it to do what you want, but and actually, I did get into using grid areas as well, which helped, especially because the layout, the crew page especially, is it the crew? I think it's the crew page especially, between the different screen sizes, the ordering of things really changes, and you can do that with Flex as well. But like if you go to the mobile layout first, I think it's yeah, you have the title, then you have the guy, then you have the circles, and then the rest of the information underneath it.
Yeah.
And then at the mobile, the tablet layout, the picture goes from the top to the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
With grid areas, just moving stuff around like that, it's the easiest thing in the world. So yeah, that's another reason that Grid actually shown here.
Yeah.
It worked out really well.
That will be good to hear your thoughts on where to use which one as well. I have a few people in the chat saying Flexbox for the win. Team Flexbox. Oh, we got a team Grid.
There we go.
Yeah, use both all over. Good. Is the source code in GitHub? I think it's going to be available from the Frontend Mentor site. If not, you can grab the source code from the course itself. There is a possibility too.
Yeah, in the course, in one of the introduction ones, I do link to a GitHub that has the source code. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So yes, it will be in GitHub. And Hagar asks, do you use shrink? And where in this design?
By shrink, I'm guessing they mean flex shrink?
I guess so, yeah.
I mean, it is, I'd let Flex, in this case, I didn't have to do anything too complex with Grid, so I never really dove into changing, just the navigation worked. Everywhere I need columns, it just sort of did what I needed it to do. But Flex Shrink is on by default, so it's more about when should you turn it off, which probably isn't very often, to be honest.
Yeah. Is the availability of this Scrimba course time sensitive? No, it is completely free, and it will remain completely free. So yes, head over there when you're ready, which links me on to another question I saw earlier, which I now can't find. Oh, here it is. I have just started learning CSS and JS. I'm a week in. So can I cover this course, or should I complete a few projects before? It sounds like from what you've said, you should probably have a decent handle on HTML and CSS, but arguably not necessarily JS. Is that fair, Kevin?
Yeah, I would definitely say HTML and CSS being pretty comfortable. Just because if I am breaking down Flexbox versus Grid, but like if I do a display flex and it gives me columns, I'm not diving into why that happened. Or if I'm setting up some of the, if I'm doing some things that an intermediate person should understand, I'm not going to explain everything that's happening with that, just because if not, the course would have been 20 hours.
Yeah.
So I would say a weekend would probably be a little bit early, just because it's one of those things where I don't want you to feel overwhelmed either when I'm doing things. Like if I'm setting up custom properties and then you're trying to figure out what those even are, and then I'm doing we're bringing in media queries and then we're doing every step along the way, it could just be demotivating a little bit. So I would say to maybe wait a little bit more until you've done some simpler projects before jumping into this one.
Yeah, I would recommend Kevin's other course on Scrimba, the HTML and CSS crash course. I mean, I'm saying this. Do you think once someone's done this course, that would be enough?
I would say if you can get through that one, it's a good starting point. You get to the very beginning of doing layouts with Flexbox. Maybe a little bit more after that, just to sort of have, say you did this and then you did a few extra projects where you're using what you learned from this to make sure that you've reinforced everything you've learned. Just because, again, doing course after course after course, you'll just, I think, if you're not putting in your own things in the meantime, could hold you back a little bit. So starting there, maybe just doing a few extra, if you're building out a few other things, you'll learn more along the way. And then at that point, maybe it would be a good time to jump into it. Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Paolo asks, I often get confused with layouts, i.e. absolute versus relative versus static. Is this part of the course?
No, I use a little bit of absolute position. Well, the line as a little bit of a preview does go into relative and absolute. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else I used. I don't know if I use pseudo elements a lot in general when I'm doing designs, but in this one, not too much came up. I'm trying to remember if I did anything else with it. But my general rule of thumb is with absolute, relative, or static, if you can avoid even touching it, then avoid it. There's usually better ways to make a layout happen. The relative is just to create a container for something else that's inside of it, because static is the default, and static and relative are very similar, so we don't really worry too much there. It's just to know if you change the position to relative, that it sort of forces that to become a container for whatever's inside of it. If you make that position absolute and you're trying to move that around within there, but if you can get away without a position absolute, I would avoid it, especially because as soon as you get into responsiveness, if you've made a layout stuff with it, the responsiveness is going to be really, really hard to do. So I try and stick to small little things where it's little movements or decorations or things like that, where you're just doing a little line that might be relative to something else, or a box that you need as a design element somewhere. And there's exceptions to this, obviously, but for the most part, I try not to touch on them too much.
I like that advice. Not touching the positions is fine by me. Yeah. Other questions? Ooh, that's a good tip from Ryan. Take Kevin's Flexbox course. You'll be way ahead of the game if you can set up layouts early in your journey. Yeah, that is good. Point. Yes. Kevin touched on this earlier. When you're coding a site, do you start with a mobile or desktop? Kevin said mobile. I would always go with mobile. Why is that the best approach, Kevin?
I just find you end up writing a lot less code if you take that approach.
Yeah.
Because the mobile layout doesn't have much, if you set up your backgrounds, you're doing your colors. So your background colors, your text colors, you're setting up your font sizes, you're setting up the colors of your fonts, the font families, all of that that you're setting up at your mobile design, it's going to work for your mobile and it's going to work for the larger screen sizes. Whereas if you make a layout like you can see on the screen now with 2 columns and the navigation that's a bit more we have columns up there, then we have a lot more complexity in the layout. And then if you go to the smaller screen size, you have to overwrite all that complexity. So then you're going, okay, I had this, now I just need it to stack. Whereas if you didn't have a layout and everything is just stacking, and then the screen gets, it just stacks naturally. That's what they do. So then you can add that complexity, and then you don't have to overwrite as much as you would if it was the other way around.
Yeah, I have definitely found that as well. So, yep, go for mobile first, wherever possible. Brent, I really, really enjoy the Scrimba platform. Any plans or possible for VIM-like key bindings for the editor in the future? I've just looked up what Vim key bindings are. We don't have these, but we do have like your normal, similar to VS Code ones. When you're in Scrimba, what you can do, I hope this is going to work, I haven't done it in a while. You can hit F1 and then the shortcuts that you can use on Scrimba will appear. So yeah, that's what we have. We're always open to adding more. If you find any are missing, just let us know. Yeah. Can you please link to Kevin's Flexbox course? Is that on YouTube, Kevin?
I do have a course. I think they're talking about flexboxsimplified.com.
Right.
I think that's the site.
Yeah, please, right. Okay. Take control of Flexbox. Here you go. Check that out. Yes, so if you do this, you will be well on your way to being ready to take Kevin's new course over on Scrimba, which launched today. Oh wow, look at this. 899, 941. Can we get it up to 1,000 by the end of this stream? I think we can. So talking a bit about mobile versus desktop and things, what was your approach to adding images to the site? Because you mentioned that the astronauts caused some problems. How did you kind of tackle that in the end?
Getting them in there for the sizing, it ended up being a solution that will help out for the last page as well, which is something we could talk about after. But the other thing with Frontend Mentor is they did supply, actually there's 2 things. One is for the images, like the main images, they did supply them as WebP and as PNGs. And so we looked at using the picture element instead of just the regular image. Just so we can actually add support for WebP, which I think now actually has really good browser support. And I mentioned when I do it, because we're really looking at like the simplest implementation of the picture element in this one, just to introduce people to it, because I think from my experience, a lot of people have never even really seen it. And it opens up tons of doors. And in this case, what we're doing is we're just building in support for older image or for different image formats if the browser can support them. But as you can see here, you can do a lot more with it. You can actually, if you have different resolutions of image, you can have those resolutions come in depending on the screen density. And the browser is actually really smart with these, where it can choose if your screen, say you're on a desktop and your screen is smaller and it doesn't need a different one, like it's going to pick automatically. You can build media attributes into it to do a bit of art directions. You can actually have like a tall image come in at one screen size and a different size, like different orientation, and different cropped image come in at a different size. You can do the higher or low resolution images. And as I said, we can do the different image formats like we did in the course.
Cool. Yeah. So picture image, basically, as it says here, allows you to input different formats of the image for the browser to choose from.
Yeah,
basically.
And the browsers are really smart with how they handle it. You pretty much just give it the options you want it to, and the browser is going to choose the best thing for the situation that it's in.
That is really cool. Looking forward to seeing how you use that over in the course. Caffeinated Pixels is going to start the course once he has finished Module 13 of the Frontend Career Path. Yeah, cool. Tom, I'm not going to start it till I finish the TypeScript course, but I will enroll to help you reach your target. Yeah, amazing. Can you please explain asks Mohammed, more about max width, applying that for images and divs. Ooh, interesting question.
So in general for images, but it's part of the reset. We do set a max width of 100% on the images and the picture element. I didn't remember if we needed it on the picture element or not, but I put it on there. Just the picture element's a little weird in how it works sometimes, so I threw it on there. The reason we want to do that is I always say that and actually this goes back to why I like doing mobile first. Websites are responsive before you write any CSS. Like if you just have a blank, or you have just an HTML file, it's going to be perfectly responsive, except for your images, which if they're big will just overflow the side. And so putting a max width of 100% on the image just means that the image can't be bigger than its container or its parent. So then if the viewport does get smaller, the image will shrink with it, it won't let it grow bigger, but it'll allow it to shrink if it doesn't have enough room. So it just means that it basically makes our images responsive by doing that. For things like divs, you might have a container. So you're doing like your dot container. And then you'll say, I want it to be a width of 90% of my screen and centered with margin 0 auto. So it's centered, but then the width of 90% means if you're on a really big screen, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in general, you'll see like designs, even this one, like at one point you want it to stop growing because even if you're on a really big screen, then like the person's moving their head to see it. And I think most people don't make their browsers full width if they're on a super large screen, but we do generally want to limit the total width of content. So if you just give a max width of a fixed value, then it'll grow in a responsive way, but then it stops at one point, it locks in at that size.
To stop it getting out of hand, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Sean, currently doing the JS course with Pear. Looking forward to doing your course. Kevin, this platform will be my new university. Great to hear. Excellent. Yes. So, Kevin, I happen to know that you are currently recording the next weekly Web Dev Challenge, which will go live next Monday. Can you give us a hint about what it's going to be? Or you can just tell us, because it's to do with this course, isn't it?
Yes. I'll give a bit of a hint that it's something to do with the homepage. And it's something that even talking with Matt, who's at Frontend Mentor, one of the things that we sort of talked about was the differences when you have a static design files like this. You sort of have to make some choices sometimes because they can't convey everything. So in this case, we have a page and there's things that will happen. We could talk about it, I guess, in more detail, but like the explore button there, they do provide a hover state for it. And it's what happens in that, when we hover. They tell us this is where we're starting, this is where we're ending, but we don't know what happens in the middle of that. And there's a few other things in the design there too. Like we have a static desktop view, a static tablet view, but like what's happening and what are the choices that are happening in the middle? So it's something that we talk about throughout the course or at times in the course, is these decisions we have to make sometimes because we have incomplete information. So the challenge is going to sort of revolve around that and making some choices with that explore button to help make it come to life.
Yeah, and that's going to be going live, as I mentioned, next Monday. So keep an eye on this page here. It will appear at the top of this list of challenges. Yes, so that will be awesome. So before I forget, because I'm pretty sure I will forget, Kevin, you are currently doing a sweepstake. That's right. To celebrate your course, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I will get that up now. Can you tell us what that involves?
Yeah, so to celebrate the launch of the course, both Scrimba as well as Frontend Mentor were kind enough to offer to give away some memberships, annual memberships for each of their platforms. So if you are on Twitter and you find my tweet that you can see right there on the screen, all you have to do is retweet that to be entered, and then you have a chance to win an annual subscription at both Scrimba and Frontend Mentor.
Yeah, that is right. So go ahead. There's the link in the chat now, and RT it, and you could win, as Kevin says, annual subscription to Scrimba and Frontend Mentor. You would be set to go. 474, really, retweets as of now. Have you added those together? Yeah, probably. That's the point. I don't know if we should add quote tweets as well. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Yes, Mohammed says, I can't believe he answered my question. I'm a huge fan of you. Yeah, I am really excited to take this course, Kevin. It looks fantastic. I'm really looking forward to delving in a bit more into this design, because I didn't really realize how much complexity it has, but also how you can really reuse a lot of different functions and CSS elements, I suppose, in this design. So that would be cool to discover it. Do you have a favorite page or part of this design?
Good question. I think I like the planet ones. I just think the images they got for the planets are really cool. They look super nice. That was sort of the one, I think that was the first page we saw as things were, or we saw the home page, but then this was the first interior page where we sort of got a look at how things were going, and got me the most excited for the project. But I think overall too, just I enjoyed doing it. It was fun for me to work on. It's always nice working on a course where you're excited to work on it, because it's just a fun design to put together. So, yeah,
I'm quite interested also about these backgrounds, because if you look at them, they're different across each page.
That's true. That's one thing I was going to mention, because we were talking about the images just really fast. Not only are they different across each page, but at the different screen sizes, they're different as well. So it's another thing that we sort of dive into there, because it is different with CSS, doing a background image versus bringing in an actual image. There is actually work being done where you can provide a set of images for different resolutions, but in this case we couldn't use it within the CSS because the images are literally completely different at different screen sizes. So we sort of explore how to do that for each page as well. Yeah.
Super cool. And in case you're wondering, this is what our nav bar looks like on mobile. So it'd be cool to figure out how that is done, this kind of frosted effect.
That style sort of took off at one point, and I felt like it was getting overused, but I thought that they did seeing it used here. First, I find it fits with the theme, and it's used in just like the right amount that it doesn't come across as gaudy or anything. It looks super slick, and it's a fun effect to do, and it's not too hard.
Yeah, cool. I agree with you there. I think this is a classy way of using it. Rayan, does the quote tweet count on the giveaway? I think it's going to have to. Yes, but just in case, if you have quote tweeted, then retweet as well. Bob has retweeted. He's hoping to get a free year of Scrimba. Yeah, that is amazing. Wow, I can't believe we have spent an hour already talking about this amazing new course. Oh, look at that, 998 students.
So close.
2 more people hopefully will enroll while I find the information. Oops, wrong page. And then that was actually an accident. Usually I do it on purpose. For our next live stream, where I don't want to add it to my queue. Michael and Pumpkin and I will be having a go at coding some of this site. Yes, that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's on this Friday at 5 p.m. BST. So I hope you can join us. It's all there. Here is the link in the chat. And if you haven't already, do go ahead and enroll on Kevin's brand new free 6-hour course all about space travel. Let's see if we've hit. Oh, we haven't. No, we must enroll. I'm sure, by the time I log in tomorrow, we'll probably have 2,000. Wow. Thanks a lot for coming, Kevin. It's been amazing working with you on this course, first of all, and also finding out more about the design and the process that went into building it. So yeah, thanks very much.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was fun to talk about, and as I said, it was a lot of fun to put together, and I hope everybody who has enrolled in it is going to really enjoy the course and hopefully learn a few things and have fun building the layout, because it's a really fun project.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure everyone will love it. Yeah, well, that's all for now. And hopefully see you all on Friday afternoon for some coding fun.
Yeah, you can have fun building it too, yeah.
I am sure. I'm really looking forward to it, actually. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming, everyone, and see you next time. Oh, that's the wrong one.
I know your pain on that.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.